Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Goodness. Have you heard about a technology regulation soon to be implemented in Sri Lanka in regards to the usage of mobile phones? Sri Lanka's Telecommunication Regulatory Commission has announced the implementation of a mandatory IMEI registration system for all mobile devices. The big brother is to watch. Does the regulation apply to us? That's the question I need to ask. Starting from January 28th, mobile devices with unregistered IMEI numbers will no longer be functional on Sri Lankan telecommunication networks. Devices already connected to local networks before this date will be exempt from the new requirement. Regulatory Commission advises consumers to purchase only devices with registered IMEI numbers to avoid future connectivity issues. So you might wonder, what is IMEI? Of course, everyone uses a mobile phone, but probably the technicality of it is what one may not be connected to, right? So what is IMEI? It's a 15-digit serial number, reveals details about the phone without having to physically have it in your hands, including the brand, the model, year and release, and more. So does your mobile have an international mobile equipment identity, which is the IMEI number? Yes. Every phone in the world has one. In Sri Lanka, if you don't know how to find your IMEI, users can verify their device's IMEI registration status by sending an SMS to 1909. So 1909 is where you send an SMS and you tend to find. There's a format that you need to send the SMS in, requesting, which has been available on various websites, on the government registered websites, in terms of how to structure those SMS to get the responses. But that's not the only way. There are multiple ways that you can get the IMEI by, looking at your settings, or it's in the packaging. The original packaging would have the IMEI number. So this is how you have access to that IMEI number. So what's the conversation and what's the big deal about it? It's a piece of 15 numbers put together. And you might wonder, what is the big deal? Well, the primary reason the IMEI numbers are important is their ability to help track down and secure lost or stolen phone. So ideally, if we were to have the phone taken by someone else, but you knew your IMEI number, you could report the theft to the mobile operator, give them the IMEI, and they would then block the phone. This means that the criminal would not be able to use it, even if they put in a new SIM card, as the device can be blacklisted. So if the thief takes the phone to a mobile recycler, which happens also, to exchange it for money, the company can always check the IMEI first to see if the phone has been reported as stolen. So these are the advantages of IMEI. Look, it's always been a good idea to write down the mobile device's IMEI number and to keep it safe, not to be exposed to the public. So in the event of an emergency or an incident, you can report it, right? You can use to report it. The police also uses the IMEI to locate where the phone last made a connection to the mobile phone network. However, this is normally only undertaken to find the missing people and understand the calls made from their devices to track their movements. So the law enforcement kind of uses this for various investigation. The point of IMEI is to identify the device, not to track the user. Let's look at it if that's the case. The information IMEI provides is added when the phone is being built. So it comes with the build, meaning it does not include any information about the name or the address of the phone registered under, or the number on the SIM card. So with all of this being given, will a hardware identifier such as an IMEI be a threat to personal data? Before this question can be answered, let us look at what has unfolded with personal data protection in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is considered as the first Southern Asian country to enact independent legislation for personal data protection with the Personal Data Protection Act of 2022. So who does this apply to? The Protection Acts, who does this apply to? The Act is designed to apply to entities located in Sri Lanka as well as outside Sri Lanka, including those offering goods or services to Sri Lankans, and specifically targets data subjects in Sri Lanka. This may include digital platforms providing services to Sri Lankans from outside Sri Lanka. The Act, among other things, provides for a legal framework to provide for mechanism of protection of personal data of data subjects. That could be about a person, it could be about any subject that it entitled to that protection. So let's look at the controversy around this act. So until recently, Sri Lanka did not have a legislation relating to protection of data and privacy. Although different sector-specific laws existed, such as the Computer Crimes Act, the Banking Act, Electronic Transaction Act, the Right to Information Act, the Telecommunication Act, they all recognize the need for privacy and confidentiality. So there was a gap. Obviously the identified gap has been filled with the Personal Data Protection Bill, which was published as a draft bill in 2019. It was subject to several rounds of revision and subsequently was passed by the Parliament of Sri Lanka in 2022 as the Personal Data Act. Now, although certified by the Sri Lankan Speaker of Parliament at the time, except for one part of the PDPA, which deals with provisioning related to the regulator under the law, i.e. the Data Protection Authority, the Act is yet to become operative as it provides for different time periods. So it's a phased implementation within which certain parts of the law would come into force, allowing controllers and processors a much needed grace period. You can't flip an act and implement it. But again, the first phase that is already in is to seek to identify and strengthen the rights of data subjects and provide for the designation of the Data Protection Authority of Sri Lanka. Look, in the investigations that I have done, it is not clear as to yet what is deemed as personal data from a Sri Lankan context. I guess most of it would be defined or refined as the next phases of the implementation starts to proceed. But this act is primarily inspired by the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and therefore shares many similarities with the GDPR. So if you can bring your attention to this, where they have a Data Protection Act, which is not fully implemented, and at the same time, they're collecting quite a bit of information about phone devices, which is the IMEI numbers. So is it all connected? Is this a personal data that is at risk as well with the serial number that's getting collected off the phone? So half-cooked act and a lot of information being collected. Is it going to present any risk? So let's start with that question. The importance of efforts around privacy and data protection is personal data and its protection, correct? The crucial regulation also drew, even though it's just drew a main part of it from the European Union GDPR, it also drew knowledge and experience from the international best practices, the United States and other Asian countries, and formulating a robust foundation for safeguarding personal data. So now let's revisit that question. Will a hardware identifier such as IMEI be a threat to personal data? In the European system, under the Data Protection Act, EU GDPR, there are key elements in the definition of personal data. So the personal data is any information related to an identified or identifiable natural person or data subject who can be identify directly or indirectly. Now, since Sri Lanka doesn't have a particular definition as to what personal data meant, taking the definition from EU GDPR of personal data and the IMEI number into account, the IMEI number becomes personal data as soon as it's associated with a person. Consequently, the IMEI number of a smartphone would not be regarded as a personal data until it is purchased. So, however, when a person purchases a smartphone and activates it, which often leads to providing personal details such as the name, email address, passwords, and biometrics, etc., opting for Face ID unlocks, the IMEI number becomes personal data, as it's now linked to other information from the owner or the user of the smartphone. So at this point, the individual elements of the definition of personal data becomes important. Since personal data refers to information relating to an identifiable person from direct or indirect interference, when various data points are capable of identifying a person, any data being combined with the personal data in turn becomes a personal data, correct? Right. Here is something to note. Under the European Data Protection Board guidelines on processing personal data in the context of connected vehicles and mobility-related application, states that when a person's smartphone is paired with the dashboard of a rental car, while using Bluetooth or USB connection, a variety of data is processed by the rental car. This might include phone identifiers, voice and data communication, contact list, web browsing data, personal contact, schedules, choice of music, radio, and other streamed audio or video content, which all reveal personal information. As such, they help to draw a precise profile of a data subject, which means about a person's profile, right? Since IMEI are being used to lock devices to couriers, blacklist lost or stolen phones, track the location of a smartphone becomes easy. It is obvious why the IMEI number of a device should be considered as personal data after its purchase and subsequent activation. Since IMEIs are being used to lock devices to couriers, blacklist lost or stolen phone, track the location of the phone becomes easier. And it is obvious from the discussions that we had before why the IMEI number of a device should be considered as personal data after its purchase and subsequent activation. In addition, the use of IMEI numbers to track individuals by law enforcement authorities makes a good case for why the IMEI number is personal data, as soon as it becomes associated with person by purchase, activation, or however else. According to the Sri Lankan government, of course, in an effort to reduce the mobile theft and also to work on the existing regulation requesting registration of all gadgets, IMEI number. Well, this initiative makes gadgets safe from unauthorized access and also afford legal requirement. So who's responsible for what here in that case, right? Telecommunication Regulatory Commission body oversees the registration process and ensures compliance and maintains the national database of registered IMEI numbers. Just underline that, right? They maintain the national database of registered IMEI number because we will come back to this database question. Mobile service providers like Dialog and Sri Lanka Telecom will verify the IMEI numbers of connected devices. So they will be drawing the user's details along with their systems also will have access to their IMEI databases, all right? Again, keep that in mind. Importers and retailers ensure all devices sold are registered and provide customers with registered IMEI numbers and proof of compliance. So all these touch points are still available to databases and there's a lot of data being stored in places. So if you do not comply, just imagine that you decide that you are not going to comply with this regulation or the new requirement from the government. or in other words, failure to select the TRCSL approved smartphones may result in various consequences for the customers. So, what are the consequences? The inability to claim warranties from suppliers, difficulties in obtaining one-to-one replacements, a shortage of spare parts of specific phone models, and most critically, network and connection issues from telecommunication companies. Such issues encompass frequency problem, bandwidth and coverage issues, as well as network connection losses. On the other hand, the telecommunication network is already tracking, one's phone's IMEI, since that's fundamental to how it works. It needs to know which cell phone tower your phone is connected to at all times, in order to route traffic correctly. Without that, the network doesn't work. From there, it is trivial to correlate the respective IMEI and rough location, as in the tower triangulation, with all of the other information the service provider has access to. Which IP addresses your device connects to, which queries you make, which phone numbers you are calling, texting, the entire contents of unencrypted text messages, your subscriber information, addresses, etc., or file, and so on. So it gets even worse in countries where a government root certificate is required by law to be installed on all devices. This lets them man in the middle decrypt any encrypted traffic. So remember this. So in some countries, governments expect you to download the root certificate by law, which means that they've got access to a whole lot of information, which you think that, the encrypted information will be kept encrypted, but that's not how it will be handled, and there will be man in the middle decrypting any encrypted traffic. Well, so far that's not the case in Sri Lanka. The IMEI number of any mobile device must be protected from detection or change. There are many crimes depends on this identifier, including the following: stealing money through SIM and IMEI scams. This occurs when accessing malicious bank sites that request the phone IMEI number to be sent to the hacker, who in turn will report that the phone is missed to obtain the new SIM card. After that, the hacker will have a cloned phone that can receive verification. So this is a kind of situation. The IMEI number can be exposed and can be used for many scams, right? Now, not sure if you know this. Sri Lanka is not the only country. There are other countries who are experimenting and implementing this in different ways and for different reasons. The Communication Authority of Kenya has announced new regulation to enforce the integrity and tax compliance of mobile devices, effectively from starting this year. The regulation will apply to all stakeholders, including local assemblers, importers, distributors, and mobile network operators, to ensure that only tax-compliant devices are sold and connected to Kenyan networks. Under the new regulations, all local device assemblies are required to upload the IMEI number of each assembled device to the Kenya Revenue Authority to ensure that all locally assembled devices are tax compliant. All mobile phone importers, whether for sale, testing, or research purposes, are required to include the International Mobile Equipment Identity Number, which is the IMEI number, in their respective import documents submitted. The CA emphasizes that the disclosure is mandatory for the registration of the devices in the National Master Database on tax-compliant devices. So there's a huge amount of data is being collected and being held in databases. Now, the authority also directed that retailers and wholesalers of mobile devices must ensure that they only retail or distribute mobile devices that are tax compliant, adding that it will provide the means by which the tax compliance status of mobile devices can be verified before purchased by retailers or end users. Mobile network operators must ensure that they only connect devices to their networks. After verifying the tax compliance status through whitelist databases of compliant devices, which will be provided by the authority. Operators will also be required to provide for the grey listing of non-compliant devices to facilitate regularization within a prescribed period, failure to which the devices will be blacklisted. And the authority added. So it is very evident that there's a lot of protection has been asked. There's a lot of tax invasion to be captured, and that's the tone and the authorities have been saying. But this development has been met with mixed reactions, with the social media user expressing that it is a violation of privacy that has nothing to do with tax and everything to do with tracking citizens. So what's happening in India regards to this? In a bid to check black marketing and mobile thefts in the country, the Indian Department of Telecommunication has mandated mobile phone manufacturers to register IMEI number of every handset manufactured in India within the Indian counterfeited device restriction. The mobile makers will have to register with IMEI number of the mobile phones imported in India for sale, testing, research, or any other purpose. For the mobile industry, black marketing, fake IMEI numbers, phone thefts, and phone tampering are some of the major concerns have led for this change in India, as some say. Now, you have looked at what's getting regulated in Sri Lanka. It's not a fully fledged implementation at all. There are a number of questions outstanding. And there are a number of other countries have taken the lead in somewhat finding the same kind of data for various other reasons. Now, here are some of the questions that you should think very deeply and also should be able to question the authorities on. What if the database which holds the citizen IMEI numbers are leaked? Remember that I was talking to you about various databases where the IMEI number is held, and authorities within the government sector do have access to it. And then the mobile telecommunication companies will have access to it for verification. So there's a database that has a lot of information, and we have a lot of history in the country and around the world that how less protected are these databases are, because these are not well thought through processes. So if in the event, if it get leaked, what is the future of the personal data that is going to be held within the IMEI number or in connection to IMEI number? Now, the next question is, does Sri Lankan government have enough protection applied to the above data from the time that it's going to be collected? So that's from in a week's time, it is going to get started, right? So do they have enough protection applied? What are the archiving procedure of personal data? Personal data collection and archiving, destroying is one of the key essential GDPR-related, GDPR-related, and other countries also tend to have this. When you collect the data, how do we archive it? How do we destroy it? How do we, manage the data? So it's not just about the collection of data. And how will they notify, as a government bodies, how will they notify their citizen when a data breach occurs? Because that is also very important, how the breach occurs and how the citizens get notified. Details on classification of personal data. What is personal data? Because that has not been classified as per the investigation or the analysis that I've done, it's not explicitly called out. So that may be in the works at the moment. What are they using it for? Where is the transparency, right? Okay, so we are trying to protect the citizens and we are trying to regulate things, but I think there is a lot more transparency that the citizens need to ask for when such information is collected by irrespective of who it is, whether it's government or anyone else. So the list of questions kind of continues as to what may come and what could unfold from that. So it is you who need to make the authorities accountable, as it's your personal data and your behavior that are getting profiled. And, if it get leaked, and then you are at more risk than any government authorities, right? So I think these are the questions that one need to ask before they start their registration process. Or this is a question that now you should be able to ask your representative in the parliament. In terms of, what is it going to happen? You have to be legitimate and be transparent and work out their processes and guidelines very clearly. With that, I will leave you here. Until then, you look after yourself. I will meet you in another episode of Goodness. Thank you.